Yes, good morning, board members and staff and guests. Thank you for joining us for this February 4th board work session. Today we have a conversation around building around programs, building facilities, and building in our talent pipeline here. And before we get started, I would like to ask Ms. Janice Hernandez to lead us in our invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Lord, we are meeting today to conduct matters of business. Guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought, and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. Thank you for being our source of guidance today. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. Mr. President, we do have 3 items of information that are on the agenda today. The Fine Arts Hotel Pipeline construction update. And we're hoping that they would take 20 to 30 to 10 minutes. I'm also asking for an opportunity for a closed session or consultation with our legal coming in. And so ask if we can go into that approximately 1 to 1:15.
What order are we going in on the first 3?
A, B, and C, as they are.
All right, let's play ball.
So we have our Executive Director of Fine Arts, Mr. Richard Flores, who's been in our district for multiple years and has had an opportunity to observe and make recommendations based on our Fine Arts program as band lead at our flagship high school and now as the Executive Director for all Fine Arts programs. And so he's going to bring some information to let our school governance know where we sort of sit. Where we wanted to take consideration to revamp, to provide opportunity for our students to have opportunity to have the best equipment, supplies, and materials in their respective programs. So I'll turn it over to him, and he will kind of present his presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, President Frazier, board members, Dr. Verstev, and senior staff. I would like to present to you a plan, a 3-year plan for procuring equipment and supplies for all of our fine arts programs, K through 12 at Southwest ISD. My first slide here will show you a presentation of the numbers of students that are enrolled in fine arts across the district. Elementary, art, dance, pep, choir, mariachi, theater, totaling up to 11,096 students. Our current enrollment for the district is 13,894. So when you do that math, that's about 80% of our population enrolled in fine arts. Now, some of those students take more than one fine arts class at a time. So if you were to extract for that, we would be in the 70 percentile, 72 to 75%. So I'm very pleased with those numbers that we have so much participation across the district in fine arts. And so about a year ago, we started a comprehensive needs assessment that was conducted by the teachers in each strand. Their requests were thorough and with a mindset on delivering the best fine arts experiences for their students. And so as I collected all the information that they were requesting, they basically fell into these categories per strand. And for me, the strand is important. Overall, fine arts is important, but each strand was asking for slightly different things. As you can see, the mariachi, choir, band, and elementary are asking for instruments, which is the most expensive item on that list, mainly because that's a one-to-one scenario where we have to have an instrument in every student's hand for the most part. And also, equipment, supplies, furniture, they serve multiple students with one item. So instruments in general tend to be more expensive. And because of the one-to-one ratio, but also you can't get an instrument nowadays for less than about $1,000. And so and plus. So depending on the instrument, they can go up to $10,000 or $12,000. So the next slide will show you that we have many instruments that are aging across our district, at Southwest High School particularly, but also at McAuliffe, Scobey, and McNair. Those are the schools that are a little bit older. And so I took Southwest High School as an example. We still have instruments. Those numbers there next to the decades are the number of instruments that we still have on the inventory that are currently being used or tried to be used from those decades. So we have instruments, 33 instruments from the 1970s. We have 45 instruments from the 80s and from the 90s and so forth. We have about 109 instruments that research did not allow us to figure out exactly the year of make, and so we're still trying to find out that information, mostly because the vendors have changed quite a bit and where the instruments are being manufactured. And so a couple of bullet points here. Over 50% of our current inventory at McAuliffe and Scobey also was purchased in the 90s, like when the schools opened. And they're still in use. McNair Instruments date back to the 90s, but as you know, when we opened the new building, they got a little bit of a package there of newer instruments. Around 2004 was the last time that we were able to do regular maintenance overhauls of instruments, and that's significant because if we don't do those maintenance overhauls over time, that becomes a bigger issue down the road for repairs, that sort of thing. And so by being proactive with maintenance, we might be able to save ourselves and not have to be so reactive with repairs. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. And the folder, the gray folder that you have there has this presentation in it. I'm so sorry about that. It has that document, and it also has the supporting document of all the items that were requested by the teachers. Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me why we stopped doing maintenance in 2004?
We got to a point where the repair budgets, the regular operating repair budgets, were just being able to keep up with fixing things, and there wasn't a lot of money left over to do that preventative maintenance. And so this proposal will include additional monies for those preventative maintenance items.
I think maybe in the future you could just ask us more money for maintenance.
Yes, ma'am.
And, I mean, if in general you're not able, if it's going to be cheaper for us to maintain than replace, then I think you should just feel free to ask.
Yes, ma'am.
For more money.
Very good. So we have some instruments that are being repaired 2 to 4 times a year, and those repairs can range anywhere from $50 to $200, maybe more sometimes, depending on what the repair is needed. We are exploring with vendors to see if they will take in trade-in instruments of these obsolete instruments, so we could get some return for that investment, even if it's just a small amount. We also have some mariachi uniforms that across our district that were purchased quite a long time ago, and we want to supplement the uniforms at the different schools as well that are starting to become pretty worn and tattered. And so I kind of brought some Exhibit A and Exhibit B items here. So this is an instrument that was purchased probably in the 80s, and so as you can see, it doesn't look really great. We're not so concerned about how well it looks, although there are a lot of bands out there that have brand new, very shiny instruments, so forth. But as you can see, if you take a closer look, there's some soldering here where things have had to be repaired. This develops some leaks over time. When you get to the point where you're soldering pieces of metal together in an older instrument, it becomes an issue. So not all of our instruments look this way. This instrument, which is equal to it, was purchased last year. So this was purchased in October, and we bought 2 of these at Southwest High School because we didn't have the 2 instruments to put in students' hands. And so we bought these 2 instruments. These 2 instruments, after school pricing, were close to $2,000 a piece. And therefore, these 2 students were able to perform on the marching band field with these newer instruments, and allowed us not to have to use that instrument. Makes sense? Okay. And then we're not only talking band instruments, but here's an example of a guitar for mariachi. It looks really pretty from far away, but with humidity changes and so forth, and just in South Texas, but also in our schools and so forth, you can see closely that there are cracks in these instruments. And so the wood instruments are more susceptible to temperature change, and when these cracks develop, then the instrument doesn't function the way it needs to. Hold its tuning, sound the way it needs to. It vibrates sometimes, and since mariachi is constantly being mic'd, you'll hear the vibrations during the performance. And so I wanted to show that as well. And then the final item is this is the Southwest High School varsity mariachi uniform as an example. But as you can see, there's some tattered places on the uniform, along with the pants and so forth. So these uniforms were purchased back in the 90s as well, and so it's time to replace these uniforms. And so we wanted to advocate for that.
How much does one cost?
One, depending on what you get, so the stitching and what you put on it and so forth, but we're looking at standard about $350 to $400 per uniform. And then if there's more accessories and so forth, then that just drives up the cost. But we're trying to stay kind of medium of the road. So progressing here to the next slide, there's not too many. In addition to replacing some obsolete items, we are also trying to enhance or supplement what our fine arts teachers currently are using. So I want to be clear about a couple of things. So if you look at the second bullet, we've been trying to keep up with growth and so forth. But in the second bullet, it talks about how band received some supplemental funding for instruments and so forth over the course of those years. And that's because I, at the time, was the band facilitator, so I was advocating solely for band because that was my role. Now that I'm in the role of the fine arts director for the district, it's time to advocate also for all of our other fine arts strands. In my time at Southwest, I have never known there to be a supplemental funding for the other fine arts strands besides band and mariachi. And so that's a part of this purpose as well. Of course, when we opened Resnick and when we opened Legacy, we also, we had big expenditures there to open those schools. But this request for fine arts is pretty comprehensive in its approach, and it assists other strands in obtaining the equipment that they need. Notably, we've expanded our choir program. So, for example, we expanded our choir program into the junior highs. Some of those junior highs have no choir uniforms. So when they go to a performance, they wear their own clothes and so forth. And so what we need to do is be able to buy uniforms for all of our schools that have choir. Additional equipment supplies also will be used to help outfit the refurbished spaces at Southwest High School, and also to bring some equity along with Legacy, and then also the SCOBY remodeling as well. We're hoping that this request would be able to help with those areas as well. So it doesn't drive up the construction cost to also fill the room with the equipment that they need, trying to route this through this process here. Any questions on that so far? So the overall proposed expenditures, I've categorized these in different ways. So those are three unique columns. They don't read those across. That's why the dark bar is in between. I was asked to categorize these by the different categories that we're asking for. For example, instruments, equipment, furniture, supplies, technology, so forth. And those are the numbers. And then also how much is going to high school, how much is going to middle school, how much is going to elementary. Obviously, elementary is less because elementary requires much less equipment and so forth. And then also by strand. And so those are those. Any questions on that?
Are you working on expanding the theater program at our elementary
That is a plan for the future, and they are part of their requests, requested theater items in here. All right, so this 3-year plan for procurement would be a request for those amounts for year 1, then year 2, then year 3. And then also how that breaks down per grade level. So in year 1, how much are we spending at high school versus middle school versus elementary, year 2 and year 3 as well. So it's a big ask, but I understand that it's a very big ask, but this is the first time that I know of, at least since I've been here, that there's been a comprehensive look at the entire fine arts and not just certain programs of the fine arts being addressed.
Well, it looks like you did a lot of homework.
Yes, ma'am.
Really very thorough.
Thank you.
Mr.
Yes, sir.
Do our kids, are they asked to pick in anybody's?
Oh, yes, sir. There's a lot of fundraising that goes on. Sometimes the fundraising is not, we try to not ask for any kind of money from parents or anything for the basics that we feel like the district should provide, like an instrument, equipment, that sort of thing. But they do supplement funding for things like trips or for, they're going to do an end-of-year social, and so they raise money for that, those types of things. So they do kick in funding for that. They do buy their own accessories to things like, reeds for the instruments, shoes that they're going to wear with their uniforms, that type of thing. That's also supplied by the students. And we also asked at the high school level. We asked for for band, for mariachi, to some extent a choir, for a fee that helps defray those accessory costs and all those types of items. And then it's a much smaller fee at the middle school level as well that they use to rent the instruments that we provide as a district, but also for incidental items like their flip folders or their different accessories that they need for their group.
Also, did you look at what neighboring school districts?
Yes, sir. We are by far on that fee side of things. We are by far one of the cheapest in the city. I'll use the extreme end. Johnson High School is close to $3,000 that every student has to pay to be a part of that program. At Southwest High School and Legacy, we're somewhere in between $150 and $200. We try to keep that down as much as possible.
Never kept anyone from partaking in the program. You've been able to work any of it.
Absolutely. Every year, depending on parent need and so on and so forth, we do occasionally scholarship some students, what we call scholarship, and so that student would not have to pay those fees. We don't ever want money to keep a student from being in. The only time that might be an issue, like in the band progress, when they start out as beginners and they say, I want to play the flute or I want to play the clarinet. Well, those instruments we don't provide as a district. And sometimes they really want to do that, but then mom and dad are saying, I'm not going to buy you a flute. I'm not going to buy you a clarinet. So at that point, we try to move them to an instrument that we do provide it as a district. We do everything that we can to try to keep the students a part of a program that they want to be a part of.
So can you cover your 3-year, if we were to move forward, that you would do this over a long, 3-year period?
Yes, sir.
To kind of bring new items, materials into all the programs from high school through elementary. Can you kind of cover what those 3 years cost?
Yes, and so that was on this last slide here. So for the first year, it would be the 1.6 million, and year 2, 1.2, and then in year 3, the 687,000. And that would take place over the 3 years. Procurement takes some time because items at this amount of money, we have to go through formal bidding and so forth, so it will take some time to get that. I will say that usually when we've done these types of items before, the costs come in a lot cheaper. When we estimated costs here, we went by what manufacturer's costs usually are, but sometimes when we bid it out, it comes in a lot cheaper or significantly cheaper than what was originally asked for.
Which was year one, which you're hoping to be this year or next year?
I would leave that up to the board. Ideally, the sooner the better for us. I mean, that would be our request, but here we are in February already, and it will take some time to procure those items and so forth. So, and then being able to get them in on this year's budget would be a bit of a challenge, but that would be our hope, is that we could start this year as year one. But if it had to wait till next year, we can do that as well.
Why are you looking at Brandon?
Because he's the man.
So this would be a fund balance item, so we're all kind of transparent and clear. And one thing we may do, there's a really good question, is we may do a 1.8 where we can get the most critical needs and try to do it this year and start actual year one with the next school year. But there are some critical issues that we need to work on and make them more palatable. I would say from this point, I know Richard has a slide that talks about next steps, is that we ask Richard and Mr. Chris to get into the room and really kind of hammer out the most critical needs. And if we do want to move forward, or our idea of presenting this as an item information is to get some direction to the board. Do you want us to continue having the conversation? Is this something that we can support? I know Brandon has also provided at your place kind of the overall fund balance picture, which you'll cover before the end of today, which has this item included in next year. And so we'll have a conversation around that. It's really to answer any questions, to see if there is some direction or more information you want us to bring. So I'll let Richard go over his next steps real quick.
Thank you.
So the board has an idea what we're looking at.
So if there's any other additional questions that you have for me that you would like for me to go back and research prior to the next time that you meet, I'm more than willing to do that. Also, we would love your consideration about this this proposal and for possible board approval in the future. And if approved, we would competitively bid all these items and the procurement of the year one items for sure. And then sometimes that procurement process start, from the bid process all the way through actually receiving the instruments and getting them to the schools can take 3 to 6 months depending on what it is that you're ordering. So.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I know that these items are absolutely necessary for our fine arts program. However, Brandon, we were discussing the other day that we were not going to spend that much money because we don't know how much we still need for the pool.
Correct.
So have we considered some of this?
And so, yeah, I'm gonna touch base on that, because I actually, the last exercise y'all told me, we'd like to know what the future holds from fund balance. And so I kind of created a list of what you have in front of you on that sheet that I'm gonna cover, because when we do construction and we talk about the auditorium today, I wanna cover and be transparent with y'all some of the things that are coming up. This is one piece of that. And so I'm gonna cover all that and kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. Not everything on there is a done deal or similar to this. These are things that we've seen that could be possibly fund balance items. Some of them might not be. But I'm gonna cover that so you can get an idea before you have to make any decisions, even on the natatorium, this or any future items. I created a list so that we could have something to work from and work out.
I have a comment. So when you start in the presentation, you said you were gonna talk to the vendors about a trade-in.
Yes.
Guys and stuff. So I'm interested if it's just a nominal, I mean, it's just like a fiddly amount they're gonna give you, if
Mhm.
there are organizations or maybe even some other public schools that
Mhm.
they don't have the
Right.
money that we have to buy.
That's-
Is there
mhm.
a process that you can donate those items to, whatever, as opposed to getting like $10 for
Right.
somebody off the counter?
Correct. There is a process, and it's through our policy that we would have to find a partner
Okay.
and then create there's a resolution to the board to do a donation. It just
I'm
depends.
just curious,
Yeah.
sometimes you go to trade in your
Correct.
vehicle,
Right.
it's better to give it to your
Correct.
niece instead of give to
Right.
$100. So, just curious.
Yeah,
So
there
why
is a-
don't we include some of those in the auction?
We can, but at the same time, our auction is
Well, I mean, if
you put them on a pallet and they can bid on them, and if they bid $5 and nobody beats them, we can kind of set some limits, but then it's like, it's gonna be very hard, because there is a pretty vast, inventory of old equipment that we need to probably get rid of somehow. And so if we have all these avenues, so we can, at our last resort will be the auction. So we can find, a trade-in value for them that's beneficial to us, or if we find a partner that we could really support, our last option would be, because we want to get them off our inventory, we don't need to have these old instruments
Right.
sitting there that we're not using, because we need space anyways. And so that would be our last resort, would be our auction. That's usually what it is our auction is our kind of our last resort.
I guess at this junction, Richard brought the information, and I know, that you guys have requested in the past to be able to process this, so, I think Richard and his staff have been very diligent in collecting a really, pretty phenomenal inventory of what we have in our district. And so it has the years of how old that equipment is, when that equipment was purchased. I know we opened up Southwest Legacy, but we did a lot there with sharing of instruments, and some of the instruments left in this zip code is that zip code, and so it's not like we went out and purchased a lot. We did purchase some.
Yeah, the majority was all purchased new. Yeah.
Was it all new?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The last time we had a 3-year phase-in, do you recall?
2011, I believe, sir.
We were able to supplement the equipment that our kids need to. We want to be on the stage, on the field, and compete with our neighbors throughout the state. So.
And that's the bottom line is being able to, for the teachers and the students to have the equipment that they need to be as highly competitive as they can be among their peers.
We've talked about the equitable distribution of this, and it's spread throughout the district to support all categories of students, and to support students no matter where they go to school in the system. And to set some expectations. I think you asked a great question. Is there anything in the future to get our other theater programs elementary, not to the same level, but in the direction of what you see at Sky Harbor year after year after year? The answer is yes. We want to increase that. We want to increase screens, opportunities for kids. This whole issue of using technology in fine arts, we have meshes where those opportunities lie, and I think this provides that opportunity. I think it's more than just replacing equipment, it's kind of setting us on a new trajectory for the future of what we expect from fine arts in all the schools.
Any other questions?
Do you need direction from us?
I would just ask if you have any questions, you email me, I know to the right people. I think from this point, really, we have this figure, but we may get it honed down, or we may want to, and so I think specifically at the February board meeting, that Mr. Flores will come with a formal recommendation about the 3-year kind of phase-in, and that we may have with that a 1.8 to do something this year, because in my mind, as listening, he's presented senior staff a number of times on this. I was thinking this all starts next year, but if we take some action this year, it benefit our students next year. So it was a great question.
At the start of the year.
Do something with it
Mhm.
in the formal recommendation.
Yes, sir.
But it's a fun balance item, that's one thing you definitely want to be clear about.
Right.
Anybody?
Thank you, Mr. Flores, for the research. That
Yes,
was
ma'am.
very good.
Thank you very
I'd
much.
like to listen to what Brandon has to say as far as our budget is concerned. too, so.
Yes, ma'am. I understand. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for a great job.
Thank you.
All right, the next thing is pipeline.
Yes, sir. Our district champion and a number of staff have been working really hard with our Holbrook folks and our internal Holbrook branch, and they're going to present a lot of that information. I think that's been discussed at different breakout groups and brought together with the steering committee. And so we'll turn it over to Dr. Fay to present what that looks like. We also have one item that we're going to continue when we go to executive session. Not on this, but in the same arena.
We can, if you find us one, we'll tap it. So, for sure.
Thank you so much, Mr. President and Board, for allowing us to share the great work that we're doing at Southwest ISD with respect to our talent pipeline, specifically as that talent feeds into our principal role. And so our intentions today are to bring you up to date with kind of like the work that we're doing around this pipeline, what the vision actually is for that, and to give you some very specific projects that we're actually working on and we have been working on since the spring of last year. I'm going to go through this slide. I normally run through this very quickly, but our traditional system at Southwest ISD, we know, does not prepare our APs and our principals for the big jumps in leadership and technical skills that they need, and that result of that is that we lack a really good bench. And so when we tap into our assistant principals and we place them through a selection process in the principal role, there's some great gaps that exist, and some really talented individuals do quite well in that arena, and others struggle. And we want to design a system that isn't necessarily a system of struggle. And so specifically right now, our current situation is that teachers self-select and self-direct their own process. They don't receive sufficient technical or leadership training in any format other than their formal degree that they get from the university level. And then even more so when our APs become principals, they're not necessarily ready to take on that role either with the shift in responsibilities. And so our vision for talent management by the year of 2022 is that we'll have a system that prepares our teachers in the Southwest ISD system to become principals over time into a true leadership pipeline. And so what you'll see is number one down below is teacher identification as high potential. That's actually a work stream that we actually just began in what does high potential mean at Southwest ISD. And it's a very messy conversation, but it is a conversation that is currently taking place, and we've been there for about a month. And then all the way through identifying those high potential teachers and MCLs, multi-classroom leaders, that then would be invited to participate in some type of cohort around the leadership development. And then all the way through mapping out how they would land and be prepared to be a principal in Southwest ISD. And so these are the slide before and this slide really are slides that we see in every one of our meetings. I wanted to spend a little bit more time on it today because we really haven't discussed it in detail. And so what we know is that the work that we're directly working on is in the Holsworth House, directly fits into the support pillar. And all of these things currently are actually in some form or format being worked on at Southwest ISD, but the one that we're going to discuss today is specifically this pillar of support. So our theory of action is that if we invest in purposely supporting Southwest ISD principals, that it will lead to improved student outcomes. And so currently, if you look to the left of the screen, historical principal support model focuses only on compliance and evaluation at Southwest ISD. And we want to shift that towards a principal support model that purposely develops principals. And I'm so thankful because we invited several of our principals here today that are working in many of the pilots that we have going on so that we can really get a good grasp of where our gaps lie so that we can actually create this true support model. And so we have 3 ongoing pilots that are helping Southwest ISD leaders determine the path for investing more purposely in principals. And this is not work that we're doing in isolation from our principals. This is actually work that we're doing in combination with our principals. We have a distributed leadership pilot, and I believe we have Anitra and anybody else from that pilot, and Melissa involved in the distributed leadership pilot. And that's really about reducing the span of control that principals, so that principals aren't evaluating 45 teachers and 2 APs and 3 counselors and the custodial staff. So reducing that span of control so that they can spend time and coach and develop the people that are underneath them. And so the second one is the principal supervisor pilot. And I'm directly involved with that one along with Roxy and Joseph, and I believe that's it. There's other principals involved, but those are the people that are here today. And that pilot really is about defining instructional leadership and keeping the focus on that. More specifically, trying to identify goals around instructional strategies on the campus to support student outcomes. And then we have our evaluation pilot, which is actually being led by Will Baker. And that really is to try to figure out and provide PD and coaching on how to support and grow principals. And so Will will actually be here today to discuss that or share out with what he's learning. Each intervention is a tool that can be leveraged for coaching towards principal growth through a principal supervisor. And we'll get into that more so. And so what is distributed leadership? I'm actually going to read from my notes today. Distributed leadership model for campuses that will ensure leadership is shared amongst the leadership team and that individual roles on campuses fit together in a pathway in which leadership responsibility grows over time. And so currently we have distributed leadership models being run at Bob Hope, Sky Harbor, and McNair Middle School. And I've asked for Anitra in about 2 seconds to kind of give us an elevator speech on where we are with that. On the next slide, what you're going to see is what you see in orange is kind of where we are as a system. And we have this model that we learned through Holdsworth that Ram Charan from Harvard put out. And it's about how do we move from leading ourselves to leading others, to leading other leaders, and then eventually to lead the organization, which is actually where we want our principals to be able to lead from. And what you see in our orange is kind of what we have identified to be our current state at campuses. We tend to fall between the leading self and leading others, and we need to shift that so that we're moving our principals more towards leading at the principal level. And with that said, I'm sorry, this is just kind of a picture of what that's going to look like. You have a cadence of leadership meetings occurring at the one-on-one. You have your teacher leaders and your multi-classroom leaders that are actually facilitating weekly grade level meetings for planning. Principals lead collaboration on walkthroughs with the campus leadership team. That's different in that they're not just doing walkthroughs on their own, they're doing it with a team of people. Teacher leaders and MCLs obtain and interpret grade and content level data to better support student-teacher needs. Teacher leaders and MCLs facilitate grade content level PLCs around data. Teacher leaders and MCLs facilitate grade content level PLCs for learning and PD. And what that provides for is quality coaching and feedback for all teachers. I remember as a principal, I was a direct evaluator for about 40-something teachers, and there was never going to be time for me to give great coaching feedback to change instruction in classrooms. And so on that note, you have the notes, and what I'd like to do before we move on to the principal supervisor pilot is just have Anitra kind of speak to that on her campus in her 30-second elevator speech. 2 minutes? No.
The district leadership pipeline really helps me as a principal to share the responsibility of student performance. No longer is it just solely the responsibility of the principal. I'm able to bring in the APs and support them instructionally so that when they become a principal, that I have prepared them. In addition, that also helps me to prepare my MCLs, those multi-classroom leaders, so that they're able to coach their teachers. And so with all of us together working towards student performance, I believe that's really going to help our outcomes.
Thank you. So we have the next one, the principal supervisor pilot, is actually one that's kind of a collaborative effort between curriculum instruction and AHR. And basically the focus of that pilot, what we're really trying to ascertain is, can we establish 3 instructional goals that will drive change on that campus? And we know that we've identified some big gaps there with goal setting to drive instructional change, what that actually means, and the ability to actually disaggregate data and link it to meaningful strategies to address the gap. And so I've been really fortunate to work with 2 of the principals that are here, and I'm going to pick on Roxy a little bit to see if she will give her a 30-second elevator speech about that experience in working on this pilot with us.
How many? 30 seconds?
30 seconds, go.
The word that comes to mind before I speak is hope. When Dr. Bay called me in and she asked me what to form just to improve instruction outcomes, because I know our students deserve it and we need it. That one question turned into a 4-hour meeting. and then it evolved into several other meetings. And what I was able to identify was what can I, Roxy Freeman, change from here until it's go time, first round of STAR. And I was able to identify some areas, and that developed into a chosen program, which Dr. Fay and Dr. Versta were able to go and meet with the parents, and these students were chosen. And it was an investment into, it was an investment, we proposed, we told the parents that it was an investment in their child's success. But what I will say is when I walked out of that conversation, being able to identify what my 3 goals were, it felt like I had confidence and hope that was lacking before that meeting. So I thank you for that.
Welcome. Great. And so the next pilot that we're actually working on is looking at a different evaluation system for our principals. And the senior sponsor on that work is actually Will Baker, and so I'm going to let him speak to that.
So we've, as I've spoken to you about this before, we've developed a tool that's really tied to our leadership definition that the district's been over a year on developing. And so we're moving into actually preparing our principals with Southwest values. And so I get the honor of working with 3 principals. I have Ms. Crisp, I have Ms. Garza, and Ms. Wilson. And we meet monthly and talk about their progress using the tool that you see up there as a guide for our conversations. We just completed here this last month our mid-year conferences, our mid-year evaluation, in which we kind of looked at each indicator and decided on where they were in their level of performance and supporting their growth. And we'll continue to meet monthly, and then when we get to the end of the year, we'll have a summative. At the same time, they're using a tool that's designed specifically for assistant principals, and they're using that with their APs on their campus to lead their growth towards becoming a principal, as Ms. Chris said.
Great, and we'd have kind of this other thing. It's not really a pilot, but I'll speak to Frances as my confidant. Is she in here? Frances. So Frances is actually involved in another project that really isn't a project, but really it's kind of like we put everybody else in this basket called this is the way we've always done it at Southwest ISD. And I can share probably, we had a conversation yesterday about it, and do you want to share the struggle with that, Frances, or what you have aha'd in that process with your particular principal?
I'll share some great points. I love it as a central office person. It allows me to have a different type of focus and different type of lens when I come to visit a campus. Typically when I come to a campus, it's all about the money or how to spend money. And this time we get to do learning blocks. We've got to go through the campuses and really take a different lens on instruction and making sure we focus on student base. I actually like it, the evaluation part of it, because I feel like I'm helping a first-year principal who is a very innovative thinker, put some structures and systems around the plans that she has to help them come to life. And it's not just an idea, now it's a plan. So those are all positive things. It's just hard to get out there and make sure that we're all evaluating the same way, because the way that I evaluate may be different than somebody else evaluates. And I fear that if we do not norm ourselves, that I will be more critical because I'm spending more time with somebody than somebody who doesn't spend as much time with the principal on campus.
And to that point, Frances has a full-time job called Executive Director of Federal Funding, right? Will Baker has a full-time job called Executive Director of Human Resources. And what we're trying to do is find just the right balance so that we can truly support and develop not only principals, but APs in our system. And so just to kind of summarize where we are, each work stream that we've shared with you today has very specific outcomes that are monitored and measured through the pilot. We're not doing it we're doing this trying to learn from our current system and trying to learn from our current principals about what they need to be successful so that ultimately our students can be successful. And it's been fun for me. I have a full-time job, but I get to work specifically with Joseph and Roxy around student outcomes, and I actually really enjoy that. And so, but understanding that that is not my full-time role. And so the specific work streams, again, are the distributed leadership, principal supervisor pilot, and then the evaluation pilot. And all of that, what we're trying to ascertain is learning. learning what's going to best fit the needs of our principals at Southwest ISD so that we can develop that pipeline along the way to ensure that if we have 18 campuses, that we have 18 viable principals sitting in the chair that can do the job. And that we have a bench that we're growing along the way called assistant principals, teacher leaders, multi-classroom leaders, so that when we do have an opening because of a retirement or somebody decided to move off to a different district, that we have someone ready and able to move into those roles. And so ultimately, I thank you for giving me the 20 minutes, even though I only took 16, and that was with the other comments about the oil wells. But y'all have questions? Just, making an observation, so trying to be mindful of time.
I just also want to say Joanne does a really great job with this and has really kind of been a great shepherd. Also understand and thank Dr. Manny O'Dean.
Yeah.
Who's here. He's our connection to Holdsworth. We have Leslie, who's now an employee here at Southwest, Daniel Barsonet, part on the HR staff that work with Dr. Fay and the senior staff in principal. This is it's a 5-year journey. We're about 2.5 years into the journey, and the analogy I can use is the ship starting to turn. When we talk about the most important position in our school district, any school district, is that position of campus principal, and what support that we can put around them, what we can do. A lot of us have had the opportunity to come through this system and be principal, and it was a swim or sink type of environment, and we know we need to change from that because we know that with support that our students have better outcomes and live better lives because of school experience. And so I just want to commend the whole staff. This is different. We're moving from hire someone, put them in a position, let's see what happens. And a lot of times what we see is we start all over to a system that people plug into our system, but we don't take 3 steps back when we put a new person in to learn. So it's exciting to see, and they wouldn't happen if it weren't for the shepherding of someone like Dr. Fay, but also hearing directly from our principals about their experiences and what their desires and needs are to not only put support, but to also build the bench. So it's a really exciting time here. We have 2.5 more years before this becomes full Southwest ISD, and we plan to take full advantage of Manny back there.
Yeah.
He does a really great job. He's on track and helping everyone.
So there is other work happening that are being led by different people across the system. We have the leadership commitment work that's being led by Selena and the public relations team. There's a lot of different things that we're working on. The 2 things that we haven't really discussed is actually between Danny and Leslie being onboarded into Southwest ISD. We're actually for the first time actually creating a coaching model that we want our principals to use, and we're actually going through our first process and iteration of what that looks like with current people that are actually involved in the pilots. So while they're working on the pilots, they're actually going through some structured protocols and learning around what coaching actually really looks like in our system. And then Danny has been strategically involved with helping us beef up and ramp up our selection process, not only for onboarding campus leadership program, which is coming up again, where we'll have 2 more campuses that are going to be working with Holdsworth outside of what they're normally doing here. But then also helping us sort out what a selection process should look like when we're onboarding APs and principals in our system. And so we're really excited about that work, and I thank them. And I'm completely indebted to Manny O'Gean for the rest of my life because he's pretty phenomenal. So thank you so much. And that's it.
Does that time? Yeah.
I am still within 1 minute of my 20, so that's why I took that time. Thank you.
You accused me of 2 seconds.
I didn't accuse you. I encouraged you. Thank you, sir.
All right, let's go on with the construction.
Yes, sir. This is a continuation of our last meeting, specifically focused on the natatorium. Some updates, some things to walk away from last time was we were sitting around $6 million from fund balance to get a 50 meter, 750 seats, Murtha pool, and the kind of the end of the meeting was we need to be at 5 million, and so we had the task with, and so I tasked Rafael and our team to go meet with Marmon Mock and Joris to figure out how we can get there. So they're here to present kind of where we're at from that last meeting and give you an update. At the end of that and the conclusion of that, I want to kind of go over fund balance, give you the projections that you asked for from last time as well, and just talk about some of the things that are coming up and possibilities. And so I'm going to turn it over to the team, and we'll go from there. And if you have questions, we'll go over everything and then get into the fund balance part of this presentation.
And so here to give the presentation, we have Sean Bacon with Marmon Law and Rusty Mellon with Joris. So,
okay. Well, thank you. Good afternoon. So last month, we went through some of the program items and some of the costs associated with that. And what we heard, not only bring the 6 down to a 5, we also heard that you definitely want the 50 meter, you want the 750, and the MRTA as well. There's also another component that I apologize from the very first presentation I gave you guys. I was talking about the 2 different types of systems. One is a concrete shell, standard concrete shell pool, and the other is the MRTA. What I showed and depicted in some of the imagery is on the MRTA system, you see this cavity or this service area that you can access around the MRTA system. Actually gives you access to the nuts and bolts of the plumbing system to the pool. In our original numbers, when we were providing those numbers, even all the way back to the last presentation last month, did not include that service tunnel because we were trying to be as efficient with the money. Our understanding is that you guys, or the team facilities, really respects the idea of having that. A lot of pools are built with them. A lot of pools are built without them. But what I'm about to present to you is that there are additional costs for that. But overall, what I want to explain, overall, the number actually has decreased. So as we get into it,
that number, how much was that?
For the service tunnel, it's 409,000 project, 409,000 project total, not just construction. It is project total. Okay, so with that, that provides you the service tunnel. So when we get into the numbers here and we recap and regroup and come back with the revised numbers, our original project bond money was $21,200,000. The current program adds to this date include the 50-meter pool as a MRTA pool system, the 750 spectator seating. That number is just under $5 million add. So now we're at $26,188,719. Then with that option of the service corridor, whether you have it or not, that is another $409,000. The new revised with that option is $26,598,140. That delta from the 21,200,000 is basically 5.4 million.
And on here up there, you have 25 to 50, 500 to 750 seating. Right there in that area, it's the second 50 and the 750.
That is what's up there. So it's the 50 meter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you so I can clarify.
Yeah, that's a
the
good
25-yard pool, the 500 seating is at 21.2, like you're seeing on top. If we want to go from the 25 to the 50 to the MRTA to the 500 to the 750, we need to add $4.9 million to do that.
Correct.
This is still 2 pools. We're getting 2 pools, all MRTA, 750 seating for 4.9 right now. This
yes, sir.
Include the 21, because our budget's like 18, and then city giving us like 3.8 out of the 4 million because they got some fees. Say it again?
Nothing from the county.
Nothing from the county, no.
This is down, the last time we presented.
Yes, sir.
Without the tunnel was 27.8. Right?
Yes, sir.
Now with the tunnel, it's going down 27.
Correct.
Yeah.
So Joris and I, we've sharpened our pencils. Raphael and I sharpened our pencils on overall costs, understanding some of the numbers. When we finally got in finalizing numbers, some of the soft costs, what we call non-construction costs that really round up to your total project budget. Some of those numbers were assumptions. We finally got hard numbers on those. Assumptions are always trying to be conservative, so we were under those. So there's a little bit of savings there as well. So all those numbers, now that they got finalized, the numbers are a little better.
How much does the city do?
They have us 4 million, but there's some indirect costs that, because they're having to run it, so we're getting like 3.8 from them. So overall, 3.8 is coming from the city that's putting into this.
Do you mean they're having to
Well, they have their little group that they have to hire to oversee this stuff, and so they take indirect costs off the top. Many people do that with grants.
3%.
It's a management.
Who's overseeing it?
Their team, they're like their construction team over at in the city offices.
City
They
development.
take a percentage of the overall city bond to pay their salaries.
But why are they overseeing it?
They would
They're
be-
only overseeing their $4 million.
Yeah, they want to be a part of the first part of the process until we spend their money. Once they want to be a part of that because they're going to reimburse us, so they want to be a part. So they'll have a team that will come and work with us in that first part. Once we spend their money, because we're going to spend their money first, then they will go away and not be a part of it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they're it's the city, so they're a little bit more restrictive. So there's some things that we're working out with them, but
So there's stipulations, right, that come with that $4 million. That team in particular manages that expenditure, make sure that we're providing HUD contracting, make sure we were spending the budget on actual construction,
Right.
not on design.
Right.
So,
We know that.
yeah,
Yes.
so it's stipulations that we're tied into
Can you
because of the
show me
bond.
where you changed the 6 to 5?
So we don't have it in here, but I think Dr. Verstev handed out that additional sheet as part of the other presentation we did last year, last brown bag.
the last brown bag we were saying that we needed $6 million from fund balance, and you said
I think it was
The
27.
last brown bag, it was a 26, and I see a 26 now. I changed it. 5.
well, the last brown bag it was the fund balance part was because the project piece was the same, but we were asking for $6 million to add to the project. We took it that you wanted us.
About the budget, but the total cost was 26 something, wasn't it?
No, it was 20.
It was a high 26, almost 27,000.
No.
Now, and like Mr. Crisp is saying, what we were coming out of fund balance was a $6 million difference. Based on the meetings that we've had now, looking at the numbers like we did on phase 3, now that we know fees, general, CMR fees, all of those numbers, we have actual figures. So instead of coming to a $6 million out of fund balance, with the corridor, we're at 5.4.
You want me to go to the next?
Too, you know?
That's why I'm here.
You're really in a bad place. We don't pay very good.
Should I go to the next
I
slide?
enjoy this.
Service the pool without the corridor. Why is that like an option?
Well, most pools, your concrete pools,
Well, I know concrete, but that's where we're not going with concrete.
correct.
We can't service it.
Well, we won't be serviced, and it'll be if Murta, we're gonna have a warranty, so they'll fix it. Now, our pipes and stuff under there, if there's a break, we're gonna have to get to them.
There's some pros and cons to it. One is you have access to them, and if they leak and break, number one, you know if they're leaking. If you backfill up to the Murtha system and not have that service corridor, you don't know until it's a little bit too late. I shouldn't say too late, but it takes a lot longer to identify that. With the service tunnel, you do that. You do identify that. Secondly, it's much easier and less invasive to make repairs if it's necessary to that system. Now, I'm not talking about the Murtha system itself. That's easily addressed from the exterior, or what I would say, the pool water side. But access to the pipes is.
Just like a crawl space, you know,
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You'd have a door from the inside or outside?
Yes, sir.
you go in?
It'll be
Yes, sir.
underneath, yeah.
So when the
For the
Murtha
pump
is
room.
installed, that tunnel is not automatically in there? We
No.
have to-
Matter of fact, surprisingly, it's 50-50. Matter of fact, a Walker pool, we backfilled up to it. It's not, the piping is not exposed.
And the reason why is because if you backfill it, it supports the pool. If you don't have the backfill, you have to bring in a system to
Yeah,
support it.
and
That's
there's-
why the extra cost is there.
Yeah, there's.
I mean, it's a lot of water going to that pool. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you still have those struts. You still have the buttressing, but you backfill up against that,
So Walker
up to the wall.
did not
Right.
No, they did not.
$100,000 for the corridor.
And that's where we're at. I know we're talking about like going to 6 to 5. We're trying to, because I know that we have fund balance items to talk about. Maintenance wise, we would like to have it, but if we don't want to sacrifice the project for $400,000. We want to, I mean, if we have to be
So
under
if it's
5
not
million,
there-
we're going to get to 5 million.
Brandon, if it's not there,
We get a
how
six-
is it serviced then?
Well, if we have to go in there because we have a leak, we're probably going to have to hire somebody to dig it out and
You-
fix it.
That's the bad side of this. You would have to cut your deck to get access to it and get to that pipe. That's one part of it. Two, you got to find that leak.
And what percent are you guys at pricing this out? I know the last time we talked.
We're in schematic design. We're in early schematic design. We're kind of,
What does that mean?
before we get to where, actually what we're going to do, we're going to price a schematic design package in March. And then we'll price a DD. And then the actual pricing that when it hits the streets and they develop the GMP, that will be based on the 100% CDs in August, I believe it's
So
August.
schematic design is pretty much laying out of the rooms, right? We will have a better knowledge of square footage on schematic design. We won't have details or drawers to price, structural systems, but they'll have narratives that they can do better takeoffs on.
So there's a possibility this is still going to go down.
Right,
It
but we
could
still
go
have
down.
contingencies built into it.
Yes, and we have decent contingency.
We won't, we,
900,000.
Rusty
so,
can speak to the.
Let me jump in right quick. We're still in the clouds.
Yes.
Dr. Burster.
This is
We're-
all projected.
We're conceptual design, okay? We're in the cloud. We're not below the clouds right now. But at the same time, there's a lot of science to what we did to develop this budget, okay? As far as this service tunnel, it's not really a service tunnel, but as far as that goes, the research that I've done on it, it's literally more than 50-50 that don't have it. A lot of pools, like Murtha, are built suspended. That's not in ground, they're out of ground. And when you're out of ground, it makes a lot of sense to put that on there. It does give you the ability to get under the deck, see if there's a leak, and address that leak from the back side of that wall. But the Murtha system in general is a liner pool. So you have a metal, just think of you have a metal wall panel, and you put a piece of rubber on the front of it. And that is your water barrier. If you have leaks, normally you're going to fix those leaks from the water side.
Yes.
Not from behind the pool.
And that's the same for a concrete pool as well.
Exactly right. Now, where you might find a benefit to this, and we're going to tell you that because of the Murtha system, hopefully you never have to deal with this, but warranties are in place in case you do. If you have something where you have to get behind that wall, it's typically a piping issue. And we're hoping you're not going to have that issue. But that's why you have warranties in place. And when you have warranties in place, it would cover the cost of whatever that fix is anyway. You know? So I think it's a good thing to have behind the wall, but it's not a necessity.
How much of an area is that, Rusty? I mean,
It's about 8 feet wide by the depth of the wall panel, which could be
From 7 to 13.
7 to 8, 7 to
you
9
actually
feet.
Kneel and walk around the whole pool?
Yes,
You can
sir.
actually walk around the whole,
Yeah.
now, I take that back, you can walk around 3 sides of it. Because on one side of it, you're gonna have your equipment
Mechanical,
room.
yeah.
That's not going to be.
So Raphael and Thomas can walk that once a week to make sure there's no leaks.
I think when it comes down to it, that's what you look at is, I'm gonna tell you, you're never gonna get in this tunnel.
Raphael, if we don't build a tunnel and we need to get in there, probably not at the beginning, but later
Right.
on, how much does it cost, like now, to have to dig and all that?
I mean, it's gonna be draining the pool, cutting concrete, downtime, so it's gonna be
It's pricey.
quite a bit. Now, the reason why we wanted to bring this option to y'all is because we don't feel confident enough yet to recommend not having it. So we want to be upfront and tell you that's an additional $409,000 added to the project. But I don't think we have the information yet to say, okay, 80% of the pools don't have it that have Murtha, and they don't have leaks within the first 15, 20 years.
What is the?
That information we don't have, so at least I don't feel comfortable telling you, let's not have the corridor, we'll be fine with
What
that.
is the warranty on the piping? Is that part of the Murtha warranty or is that?
Actually,
Who warranties that?
It is going to, actually, it's going to be separate. It will be separate.
Up to the line,
Up to,
right?
up to the pool wall itself.
How long and who warranties that?
I believe they have 2-year.
That'll be Joris General Contractors.
How long?
Along with the subcontractor.
But that's typically not where you have the issues. One thing,
Well, typically, we have insurance just in case.
Yeah.
You hope you don't dig camp,
So-
you have insurance.
one thing I can add to that, though, is the way the MRTA is going to be built. Your slab just doesn't stop where the MRTA walls are. They extend out basically that service or that access tunnel width, whether you have that tunnel there or not. And the reason you have to have that is getting those buttresses, those framing that you saw coming off at an angle. That, if there's any movement in the soil, which is typically what causes the problem with pipes, if there's your movement is underneath that slab. So anything that you backfill above that, where the piping will be, is not subject to that movement, except where it finally separates to go to your filtration system. But in this case, if everything works out well, we're never going to be in a spot that's outside that foundation. All your piping is going to be within that foundation. So if there's any monolithic movement, your piping is not subject to another stress for vertical change because of the way we want to put the mechanical room. So that is some assurance, but crazier things have happened. Nothing can be guaranteed.
I think what might be beneficial is, take the last 5 years, where MRTA has been installed from, say, the southern states, and which ones have put that tunnel in, and which ones have not. I think that would be very helpful. I think it's about bringing more information out.
Yeah.
We understand it wasn't there in the beginning, it is now, it's an option that we have, it's not mandatory, but I think learning from other folks would be a good thing for us.
Yeah.
And part of that is also we should be receiving with this week our geotechnical testing reports, which would be a telltale sign on our interpretation of our recommendation.
Yeah. And at this point, our assumptions based on the next door school, it's going to be slab on grade. That's where you get into the delta of or the difference between having a suspended building. When you have a suspended building, typically that you wind up with that service corridor because it just happens that way with a suspended structure. In this case, we're not expecting that. So our first thought was, let's go ahead and backfill. But from a service side and an access for repairs, that makes sense to try to provide that. So.
All right.
Any more questions for the team?
Is this something that we need to decide on immediately right off the bat, or is it a wait item?
I think that we need to, because we're up in the clouds right now, we want to make sure the boards, at some point we need to make a decision, the big ticket items for sure, like if 50 meter, MRTA, 750 seatings, if that's the board's direction, which, well, because I know that you wanted us to get from the 6 million to 5 million, so we're under 5 million right now without that service corridor. So that, everything that we've said that we wanted with the building, the MRTA pool, the 50 meter, the 750, right now out of fund balance, we need $4.8 million to do that.
Whatever it takes to do that.
Okay, then that's what we needed. This extra, we'll be bringing more research to see what other MRTA pools are doing, and that would be another $409,000 we would ask for if we felt like we needed it.
So that would be the 5.3.
Yes.
That'll be the 5.3. So that, right now, we're gonna be asking for 4.9 to do everything that we want, MRTA pool, 50 meter, and the 750 seating, and the research we get back for the service area, we would come back.
I get rid of that 6 by the time they come in here next time, not add
Correct.
$500,000 and then drop that $500,000 back in.
Can we list it as an alternate?
We could list it as alternate, but I know there's some design.
There,
$500,000, you drop it $500,000, we come back.
Have we listed other things as alternates?
No, nothing is alternate.
not at this time. There is some complication in trying to do that late in the design. I think early, when we get in, or when we finish up schematic and it gets priced, DD and it gets priced, I think that'll be the telltale. That will tell us where we can go and cannot. I think what happens though is, because if we provide that service tunnel, we cannot, and I'm getting into the weeds, we cannot rest the deck on a MRFA system. So then we got to cantilever the structure. That's where some of that cost is coming from. If you backfill, then that your deck, your pool deck that comes right up to the pool structure is on grade, is on dirt, on soil. And that way you don't, so that's easy to step forward or back with through, even up to DD.
Yeah.
So I think what we'd like to do is, the recommendation would be, let us get through schematics, see where we are, and then kind of come back to that and decide on that. But at this point, we're understanding a MRFA 50 meters, 750 seats, and we're going to move forward.
And remember, we're in the clouds right now. I mean, we got to get through everything, get to pricing, GMP. So there's a lot of steps. So this is all preliminary, so we give you some ideas where we are. And then Rusty's going to stick to what he said he's going to do. Or try his very best.
All right. The clouds and I'll fly by, drop a little rain on them.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And if that's all you have for them, I kind of cover briefly real quick where we are. So if you pull out your fund balance sheet, we'll take a look at this. What I want you to kind of go to, I'm going to go each line so you can kind of give you an idea what this fund balance looks like. So if we start from the very top, and I'm going to look at column where it says non-spendable all items. Investments in inventory, that is our warehouse inventories. And so we have that on the books because that's what we carry in our inventory system. Where we see restricted, this is money that we cannot use for just anything. They're really restricted to certain items. So the first one is our debt service payment. So we have a fund balance of 1.7 in our debt service side. So if we run short on collections and foundation payments, we can make our debt payment. The second one, capital acquisition, that $75 million. That $75 million is our bond that we just passed. And so back in 2012, we had $165 million there, and we spent it all down. So you saw that number decrease, but now it's back to 75 because we sold our bonds. The scholarship program, that's currently what we have in our endowment for the scholarship. State programs, that's food service. So that's the fund balance for food service. Now we have discretion to spend as a group is where it says committed and unassigned. So under committed, we have future construction needs and infrastructure needs. We have 18.3, and future construction and infrastructure, we have about 8.9. Under unassigned is 41 million. And so these numbers we can change, when all I have to do is bring a fund balance resolution. So if you said you want to add more of the unassigned to construction, we can. We'd usually do that when we finish our audit. But these three can kind of be moved at the board's discretion. So if we feel like we need more in construction, we can move it there. And then total, if you look at where it says all items, right now in our fund balance, we have 151 million, but that's kind of misleading because 75 million is towards bonds, and then you have your scholarship, and then you have your child nutrition services program. So really what's available to us is $68 million. And so that's that last column available for use. So currently our fund balance is $68 million. For us to operate as a district for 3 months, if you took all our bills and you take all our payments and all our payments to our employees and make payroll for 3 months, we need $31 million. And so that's our board policy is we need 3 months of operating expenditures. That's in case of a rainy day. And so if you subtract the 31 from the 61, we're sitting around 50, I didn't even calculate it. Like, yeah, $38 million. Last year we had phase 2 that we had asked the board for fund balance. And so if you look at the rollover items right below the 68 million, that was the phase 2 project that rolled over into this year. So at the last, when we adopted the budget, I asked for that back. So because we still had expenditures and we still had the PO open, and that is complete. I will tell you that before we get into that, you're gonna like Mr. Barajas. He's gonna bring back because that project's over, so he's gonna bring a change request, and we're gonna get $800,000 back from that 2.2. So we're actually gonna put $800,000 back into fund balance from the project we didn't spend, and so that's really good because that's gonna help us. And at the same time, I want to share that at the end of this year, I rolled in 7, but I took 2 back, so we really rolled in $5 million overall into fund balance this past year. So that gives us a pretty healthy fund balance. At our lowest, I think 3 years ago, we were like at around 58, 59 million, and it's back up to 68 million. So we have a lot of room there. Now, getting down to the bottom where the future projects, this is the list that you asked for, that you wanted to kind of know up front before you made decisions on fund balance. One thing that you already approved, it was the purchase of the 10 buses. And so I asked for 1.1 million to do that, but we're gonna get $733,000 back this summer when we actually get the buses and destroy those other 10 buses. So really, to fund balance, it's only like $300,000 that we actually took to get those buses, which was a great deal. I put in the natatorium right now, that 4.9. I didn't put in the service corridor area yet because I'm not for sure if we're going to do it yet or not, but I could change that. Currently at phase 3, as we're working through phase 3 project, we got it down to we're about 250 to 275,000 over budget. We can work to get that under. We may do some things to make some room there, but I put 300 there just to be safe because we may, if we don't want to get rid of anything, if it's going to cost us to, if we have to VE items to get that, we'd rather just bring it to y'all as an alternate and y'all make a decision on that. But that's a really low number compared to the 1.2, 1.5 we were thinking was going to happen. SCOBY chillers, as we start doing the SCOBY project, this is actually in the bond, but we're trying to figure out a way to make sure that we don't ask for a whole lot. So hopefully we're looking at options there. We can use bond funds to fund this, but if we were looking at, we're going to put back 800,000, maybe we can use some of that extra funding that we're getting back to go ahead and cover that, so that we maybe later we don't have to ask for any money for SCOBY. So we're going to work through that. Doesn't mean we're going to ask for it. We can use bonds for that, but we're just trying to figure out ways to make sure that we can use all funds available. We did price legacy on the soccer fields. On the practice fields, they don't have lights like Southwest High School does. We have lights on the main game field, but then at nighttime when they're practicing, the boys and girls and the different teams, there's one area over at Legacy where they practice it. Doesn't have lights. So their practice field doesn't have lights. If you go over here, you have the complex that has lights, and then right here behind the tennis courts, our soccer teams practice there. They have lights coming off the tennis courts, so they're able to practice at nighttime. So we kind of have a discrepancy at Legacy where the boys and girls can't practice with lights all the time. And so we also been in talks with the Pony League on upgrading lighting there. And so we had priced all of that, and that came out to about $473,000. This would be a fund balance item, but we're also in the future want to talk to the board about that money that we are coming back, if we could use that 800 to fund that. And so these are questions, and decisions don't have to be made today, but we're going to just giving you all the information. I put on there the first year of fine arts ask, that was 1.5. I will probably add the rest of them so that you can have the total over the next 3 years. I put SCOBY renovation there because we don't know. I just put 1 million just in case. This is an unforeseen. If we can fit within budget, if we don't want to be anything, I know we want to do a visit to go walk it so y'all can see what's going on there. But I just put 1 million there because we really don't know.
Is that for alternates or for?
That's for the project, and if it just in case, because we don't know, because we're so early on, I can't tell you how much, because I know we wanted to forecast it, but I kind of just took this number, and that's kind of what we did at McAuliffe when we added extra. I put unforeseen there because stuff happens, storm or whatever. And then the last one, what I need to be upfront with you is the natatorium. The way it's going to work with the city is when we bring a GMP, we have to bring the total price, and we have to create a purchase order and a contract with Joris. So that 3.8, we will have to front that, and we get reimbursed. So that's just like with the buses. So yeah, no, they have to give it to us pretty soon because they're in the bond. So that natatorium, we will add to the GMP. So it's going to look like, if we do put the 4.9 and the 3.8, it's going to look like we added $9 million to the project, but we're getting 3.8 back from the city as we pay out, and we invoice them. So that's part of the negotiation with the city. They're not just going to give us a check and say, put it in your budget and spend it. We actually have to draw down from them, but we have to put the money up front. That's how that works. And so I kind of went through all of them. These are, for the most part, the only thing you've approved on this list is the very first item. None of these have been approved. We would bring these to you in different phases, and we're all subject to decision making.
Brandon, so all of this will come out of the 37 that's left?
Correct.
After we have the
So at the end, at the end of the day, you see that 14 million. So obviously the natatorium, that 4.9 and even that 3.8, so that almost 9 million of this is in the natatorium. Well, we're not going to spend that all this year. This would be over the next 3 years that this 9 million would go through, and 3.8 would get back. So but we would take it and put it in the budget and hold it there over the next 3 years, and until we spend it out. The same thing with all the others. These are all things that are coming up in the future. Doesn't mean they're all going to happen at the same time, but this is where we would draw the money from. That bucket on the right side available for use.
Well, and if it's a long term like that, our fund balance will probably.
Correct, and it can continue to grow, and we can continue to add money. I just wanted to be upfront.
What other ticket items are coming down? I know we're gonna be talking about the Academy of Social Diversity. How much money are we looking at there?
Roughly between the 400 and 500 range. For
Correct.
hopefully, which would be 1 year role, at which time we would be interested in grant opportunities for tuition.
And what else?
Well, I would have added that today because I found that out today. In the meeting.
What else?
The only other, I mean, at this time, I haven't started budget. I'm very early on and just doing revenue. But as far as, because of House Bill 3, we've been pretty good with our budget. We will have to do another salary increase because we're going to be required to. So it's just monitoring that and see where we are as far as revenue, looking at our students coming in. And really the only thing I can foresee is if there's any issues with budget that may cause us to be running in the red, but we haven't had to do that. And with the influx of new monies, I don't see that being the case. I know in the future, I'll be truthful now and transparent. We've been able to do the retention check. We had room this year. Next year we won't because we'll have to do another salary increase. And so if the board would want to do something next year again, that would be a fund balance item because that money is going to go into salaries now because we did have some room available. I don't think we'll have that wiggle room to do with that again because that's about a $1.6 million to the budget when we do something across the board like that for every employee. That's the only thing I can think of. We've looked at all our construction projects that we can foresee. I think in most of them, our 3 major projects are SCOBY, Phase 3, and natatorium. The only thing I will say, there's a caveat, because these are early on projects that when we get to pricing, I can't tell the future. We can do our very best right now as we go. And that's the only thing I can say, to always keep in mind that, you know, we're very early on still.
And then you have to bring these to us like one at a time, or
Well,
you bring like one whole?
So like the GMP, when we come to get a GMP, which will be in November probably or October,
What is GMP?
guaranteed maximum price for the project for the natatorium. But they want to know up front, because right now that we want to go 50 meter. They want to know what we're going to do so they can prepare, because they can make a $21 million natatorium or a $26 million natatorium. And so those are keys. The rest of these will be when we bring an item for approval, we're going to be asking at that time. Yes, sir.
Even after
Tell
they
them what we want.
Well, yeah, that was the part of the last 2 meetings, is say we want this, and that's what they're going to go after, sir.
That's already out there.
That's already out there, yes, sir.
Anybody have anything to say? We need to do one more thing. Can everybody sing happy birthday?
Yeah.
This is Sylvester's birthday today.
Yeah.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, dear Sylvester. Happy birthday to you.
I don't know how he's gonna cut this cake in 22 pieces.
I bet he eats it all. All right, we need to go into executive session. Under Government Code 551.001-551.146,